Okay, we're going to take a look at the game Eylau, and that's Volume 3 in the Eagles of the Empire series. Volume 1 was Borodino, Volume 2 was Friedland. Now, I just did a video on Friedland, not a very favorable one, I'm afraid, mainly having to do with the setup of that game. Now, the first two games were by Games USA, Borodino and Friedland. But the company that produced those two games, Games USA, went out of business. And then for the third title, Avalanche Press took over the franchise, and they cleaned up the system quite a bit. And I'm glad to say that the third volume is far superior to the first two. So we're going to take a brief look at the Avalanche Press version and tell you what it's all about. Okay, by the time the third volume came out, they had cleaned up the rules quite a bit, and the rules booklet in the third edition is far superior to the first two. Now, there are only 11 pages of rules. They are illustrated, and it does tell you how to play the game. They're okay, but there are some things that are left out, and some stuff is not explained. So over the years, the system has evolved a little bit, and fans have got together and produced this new Series 3.1 version of the rules. These are much more comprehensive. I think they're These are 31 pages, way more detailed than the original 11-page rules. So if you are going to attempt this system, I recommend you take a look at the version 3.1 set of the rules. One thing that Avalanche Press got correct or right in the third version was lots of charts. So you've got this Eylau terrain effects chart in the game. You get a Russian order of appearance chart, and of course a French order of appearance chart. The idea being that you put the counters here on the order of battle chart prior to setup. Now, one thing that Avalanche Press was doing that nobody else was doing, and I thought it was kind of neat, there'd be several scenarios in it. But for example, if you played the February 7th scenario, the French got his own card with the setup, and the Russian got his card with the setup. And on the flip side was a pictorial representation of the setup, which I thought was very handy in setting up those games. And each scenario had those. So that's the cards for the February 7th. They also gave you the main battle, which is the February 8th battle. You got the French card again, the Russian card, and again, on the flip side, the complete setup. This helped a lot in setup. So they vast improved over the first two volumes. And then there was the Grand Battle scenario, February 7th and February 8th. And this one had a different kind of setup because you had to combine the 7th battle and the 8th, and it had some special rules for that. They were trying to simulate kind of the meeting engagement aspect of that game. Now, Avalanche Press has always been known for good graphics, so let's pull out the board and see what we've got. Okay, I thought the map for Eylau was just beautifully done. They did a really nice job. And one thing they did was eliminate trying to get all the charts on the map itself. Now, the map is small, that's true, but it's very well done, and the areas are much better delineated now. And it's got a winter look to it, which is nice because Eylau was fought in the winter. And let's zoom in, take a closer look at the map. This map was very functional. As you can see, there's the town of Eylau, and each little area or polygon has its numerical designation in blue and in green, facing in either direction so the Russians and the French player can see them. The rises are delineated quite clearly. Here you have a very, very steep slope, and of course you've got the lakes that were very prominent around Eylau, and forested terrain. So overall, it's a very, very nice looking map. So the map is what attracted me to this game, and I should say I've had a real history with this game. I bought it years ago when it first came out, kind of abandoned it, returned to it, abandoned it a second time, and now third time around I'm coming back to it, and now I have to say I kind of like it. But I think these third edition rules have got something to do with it, because they've clarified a lot of things that were kind of foggy before. So I like the game, and let's take a look at some of the counters and what they look like on the game itself. For those of you who do get the game, I recommend you sort them for the French by corps and the Russians by divisions. That's what I've done here with the sortation. And let's take a closer look at the counters. Okay, those are some typical French counters. Now each of these long rectangular counters represent divisions. So you've got Friant's division, Morand, and Gudin. And you could recognize a full strength division by its A classification on the upper right. So as units take casualties, for example, if Friant took a step loss, you'd flip him to his B side, and the numbers would be correspondingly lower. If the B counter took a hit, then you would go to the C counter, which you keep aside, of course. And if the C counter took a hit, you'd later flip it to a D. And if the D counter took a hit, in Friant's case, it would be removed. As you can see, Morand has actually an E counter, so he can take more casualty losses than other divisions. Now, the numbers themselves, you've got the historical designation of the division, which is really important for the setup. More about that later. And the numbers represent the morale and combat. So the number to the left here is the combat number, which is the number of dice the unit would be throwing in the battle. And this would be the morale number, higher being better in both cases. And let's take a quick look at some Russian units. Okay, there's some Russian divisions, Essen's division and Osterman Tolstoy. And they look every bit as good as the French divisions. Same information, of course, the combat strength and the morale. And I should note that these little red band here, or the green band, also help you set up by division. So those are the division counters, and I thought they looked pretty nice. That's one of the big selling points of the game for me. By the way, while we're discussing the counters, show you how they work in these areas. You're allowed to stack in an area where a division counter can fit, and you must obey the integrity of the area. So if the division fits in the area without overlapping the edges of the border, it's quite legal to stack there. And you're usually only allowed to stack one division per area. Facing is also important. That's where this line comes in. So if the line intersects the side here, anything behind that line projecting out ahead is the unit's flank, and anything in front of that line is the front. So in this case, 073 would be this unit's front, as would 090, or 060 rather, and 072. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the newer Guns of Gettysburg, which is a much newer game using polygons. But this author, I think it's Brian Moore, wasn't it? Was experimenting with this idea years ago. And this one somehow is easier to interpret than Guns of Gettysburg and Napoleon's Triumph. It's an early attempt at using polygons, and I thought it was fairly successful. Let's take a look at some of the half-inch counters. Okay, now those are some typical cavalry counters from the game, and the source of one of my little pet peeves of the game. You get a lot of these, too many of them, and they do fit in the areas by spreading them out, but you are allowed to stack them. And herein is one of the problems of the game. You've got a lot of these little wee 2-5s and 1-5s, I'll call them flies, running around, and you've got leaders on the top. So it makes what is a pleasant looking game look kind of silly with these large stacks running around. And I think it would have, and there's a lot of these. The counter clutter in this game is a little bad when you get the whole armies on. It just looks a little crowded, and I don't like that. I think if I designed the game, I might have consolidated some of these units. And I also would have gone maybe to 5/8 inch counters. These little half-inch ones look a little funny sometimes beside these big ones. And I don't know. maybe 5-inch counters would have been better. Certainly consolidating some of these would be better. I'd rather have, instead of, let's say, two 1-5s, I'd rather have maybe a 3-5. Consolidate some of these counters so there'd be less clutter. The effect on the game would be about the same, because I'm finding in practice you run around with stacks of cavalry anyway. You don't tend to spread them out too much. So that's just a little pet peeve. It's not a game breaker, but with many of these cavalry units, the counter clutter doesn't look very nice. Let's take a look at some of the auxiliary counters. Now there's some of the auxiliary counters. Now there's a whole command system for the game, and like its predecessors, you have to be kind of familiar with the order of battle to this game in order to understand the command system. Like I said, fortunately you've got those setup charts, which are going to help you a lot. You're going to be referring to these a lot, because you need to know where these units, what the command structure is for them. So there's a command system whereby certain cores are activated and others are inactive, and that's what you use these little markers for. When a headquarters is activated, you'd throw one of these on them. And when it becomes deactivated, you'd flip to the other side. The Russians have something similar, except the French activate by corps, the Russians activate by wings. And there's the turn record counter, February 8th. There's the units counter that's used when you're out of command. This is to show which units are activated in the game. And these are the snow counters, and these are used in special rules to show the special conditions that existed at Eylau. A lot of you might know that Eylau was fought in a snowstorm, or else there were snow flurries all day too, in and out. And they've got some great rules for simulating the snow in this game. I won't describe exactly how it works, but the long and the short of it is certain areas will be inhibited by snow during the game, and you'd put these little snow counters down, and any unit moving in or out of the snow could possibly go astray. You can't use long-range artillery into the snow. You can't cavalry charge, that kind of thing. And these little snow counters move and disappear all over the place during the game. So that's unique to Eylau, and I thought it was a great system for showing you the weather effects at Eylau. Let's take a look at some of the artillery units. Okay, nothing really fancy about the artillery units. These are 3 artillery units of the French 6th Corps. Now the 1, 2, 3 in the upper right are just for order of battle designation. The 1 represents the number of dice they roll in combat, and of course in this one the little horse head indicates that that's horse artillery, and they have some special rules. The artillery is okay in the game. It's a shame that they're only 1s. They don't do a heck of a lot, but when you mass them together they can be quite decisive. I suppose if he had consolidated some of the artillery units, there wouldn't be very many of them. That's why he's gone to these smaller units of only 1. So it's only the cavalry my little pet peeve is about. I think they should have been consolidated a bit. Let's take a look at these extended line markers. Okay, the extended line markers. Now, in my playing of the game, I didn't use these too often. I didn't feel a need for them. But they're there, and they can be used, and I'll show you how they work. So here we have Essen's division here on this rise at 090. And if you wanted to extend his line, he merely places a counter, an extended line counter, in the area adjacent to him. And all that means is that half of his strength, notice the 1/2, is represented by the 2 counters. So half of his strength, namely 2, and the other 2 are in here. So it's just as if Essen's division is occupying this whole area. And all the rules that would pertain to causing him to retreat or fire would pertain also to this extended line marker. So it's handy when you want to cover a front. I just haven't found it too useful yet. I need more games under my belt to really see the value of the extended lines. And might as well show you the Prussians. Late in the afternoon of February 8th, Lestock's Prussians made their appearance, and they do appear in the game also. And here's a typical division, Rumbau's division. And you can see his A step has a strength of 5 and a morale of 6. So that's the Prussians in dark blue. Okay, I've thrown a few counters down just to illustrate to you the general lines at Eylau. Now, when you set up the game itself, the game will not look like this. Like I said, the counter clutter is quite severe in this game. So this area behind is just full of counters. It's one of my little pet peeves of the game. But historically, the French line was extending through the town of Eylau here to the right, and the Russian line extended directly opposite the French. Now, early in the morning or mid-morning, another French corps appeared on the French left and came up this way and eventually turned the Russian left. And late in the afternoon, the Prussians under Lestock came over here and actually marched around the rear of the Russian position and shored up their left against the corps that was pushing against here. Marshal Ney with his corps eventually, who was supposed to be watching the Prussians, comes on the board too. He was in pursuit of them. So that's the general situation at Eylau. Now, I don't want to set up the game itself just for the video. The setup takes a little bit of time. Another little pet peeve with it. You have to be familiar with the order of battle, and setup is going to take you at least, if you're setting up both sides, it could be 45 minutes to an hour, because there's a lot of counters to set up here, and you have to be consulting these charts all the time. Now, the pet peeve I had with Friedland was that you actually couldn't set up the game because some of the units weren't even on the chart. That isn't the case here. You should be able to set up the armies intact, but you do have to be aware some of these units are a little vague. It'll say 3rd Dragoons, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 under Milhaud. That's good. But that isn't a picture of the unit itself. Sometimes you really have to fish through all these units to find those counters. So if there's any weak point of the game, I'd say it's in setup. So we'll do a couple of concluding remarks and close the video. Okay, I should make a comment on the combat system. Because some players are using the term, bucket of dice system, which a lot of people object to. I'm not a real fan of the bucket of dice system either, but somehow for Eylau it works. Now, bucket of dice system refers to the fact that you'd be taking the combat factor here of 6, you'd add the combat factor here of 2, which is 8, and the French player would be rolling 8 dice against, in this case, the Russian player, who would have 6 dice here, and 2, also 8 dice. And for every 6 you roll, the enemy unit would have to lose a step. Now, there's all kinds of modifiers, of course, whether the unit is on a rise or not, whether the unit is being flanked by cavalry, kind of thing. The terrain, such as woods, leadership will make a difference. Also, if it was a cavalry charge, whether the unit successfully formed a square, that kind of thing. These will all do modifiers to the die. And that's where the game is pretty good at recreating Napoleonic combat. I was pretty skeptical of the system at first because I had known that Avalanche Press had used the same system for their Ancient War series and also the American Civil War. So it seemed to me a kind of a generic system that I figured, well, how's that going to reflect Napoleonic combat? But they've modified and done their research fairly well. So with all these modifiers, it does capture Napoleonic combat not bad. Is it the definitive Napoleonic tactical game? No, of course not. It's a very simple game and a simple system. But visually it looks quite good. And I've played it a couple of times now, and I think Eylau is the best of the 3 that I've tried. I know they've since gone on to other titles, such as Spanish Eagles and stuff, but I can say that Eylau is a pretty good game. So that's Eylau by the Avalanche Press, and as I'd mentioned, if you do get one of the games in the series, I do recommend you download the Series 3.1 rules. And the series is being continued. I think Compass Games now owns the rights to them, or that's who's publishing them now. And rumor has it, or maybe not so much a rumor, that the next title in the series will be Austerlitz, which might be out in 2014, we hope. Now, they had done Austerlitz before, but from what I can gather from Board Game Geek and the net in general, that game is a bit of a train wreck. So it's being redone by the designer, and I certainly would consider it if it came out. So that's it for Eylau. Pretty good game. I like it, and I think it's the strongest of the three that I've examined in the series. That's it. That's all.